Hey guys, welcome back to Snack Time. My name is Ben, and in today's video, I'm going to show you a really cool project called portchecker.io. So if you've ever been into, web hosting, OSINT, any sort of cybersecurity, or just, basic networking, there's sometimes you'll want to check to see if a particular port is open, especially on like an internet-facing website, or sometimes even an internal one. And typically what I end up doing is doing a Google search and just saying, open port checker. But this project allows you to host your own, but that's not even the cool part. The cool part is the API that is accompanied with this project. So if you're writing scripts that need to check for open ports and you don't want to use something like Nmap, you can write in something like this to use its pretty awesome API. So I want to show you the project, and then I want to show you how to set this up on your own server. When we're going to be using Docker, we're going to be using Portainer and Nginx Proxy Manager. So without further ado, let's jump in and let me show you portchecker.io. All right, so I have set it up on my site already. Just so I can show you a little bit about it. It's very simple. You just type in the IP address or the host name that you want to check to see if there's an open port, and you specify the port. Real easy, right? So if I want to say, I wonder if port 443 is open on google.com. And 443 is for HTTPS traffic. So if I hit check, hey, it is. It's open. What if 444? That is not open. Cool. Well, we know that it works. So it's very basic, right? There's not a lot to it. It just checks to see if the port is open. It's extremely helpful, especially if you're setting up your own website and you want to make sure, hey, is this port open or is this port closed? All right, so that was pretty cool, right? But it's a port checker. I mean, it's not too much craziness to go into it. But as I said before, it's not even the most impressive part. The most impressive part is his API. If we go under API docs at the top here, and this is all still hosted on your server. So all of these tests, any of the stuff that we're doing still is on my site. So this thing can do all sorts of really cool stuff to really improve any sort of scripts that you're writing or program. And since you're hosting it yourself, you don't have to rely on someone else's site being up and being able to pull data from them. So you can build a script that this particular one returns your IP address. What IP address are you coming from? It's kind of like IP chicken if you've ever used that. Query post, get port check, all sorts of really cool stuff. Health, I don't care about that. This is going to be cool. All right, so this one is a get endpoint to check the status of a specific port. This is what we were looking for. So let's do this. If you look over here at the far right, check this out. This will help us build the command that we need. It makes it really easy. Like, look at all this stuff. So these are all the different code snippets that we would need to use. If I was doing a PowerShell and maybe I just wanted to do a web request, here we go. Here's a web request. And it's going to be checking to see if this example.com on 443 is open. Wonder if we can change that. Can't change it here. Let's hit test. All right, and now, okay, all right, here's the port or the host, and here is the port. So let's do snacktime.com, and let's see if port 443 is open. And let's hit run the send. Cool, true, it is. Let's see if port 445 is open. False, it's not. Genius, right? I mean, this is really cool. I don't know if you're into scripting, but I mean, if you are, can be really helpful, especially if you're writing some sort of like security script or something that's monitoring like the uptime of web pages. You can write your own uptime monitor. Like, that's wild. And said, this is all still hosted on your server. They have a bunch of documentation that you can download. That's cool, but honestly, most of the stuff that's in here is pretty self-explanatory. But what I want to do now is, since I've kind of shown you the interface, shown you the API, there's not too much else to really go into. I think it's time for me to show you how to load this on your server. And we're going to be using Nginx Proxy Manager, but I'm also going to talk about how to just run this locally in case you don't want it to be internet facing. You just want it to live on your local network. You can do that too. All right, so let's jump into the installation. I'll see you over there. All right, now we're ready to set up our portchecker.io site. And first thing we need to do is find the GitHub page. You can use the link that is in the YouTube video below, or if you are on Google, we can just type in portchecker.io space GitHub. And it's going to be this first little guy right here. And it's just going to take us right to our page that we want. And once we click on that, you can scroll down and read a little bit of the documentation. There are instructions on setting this up on a bare metal machine. So if you don't want to use Docker, there are instructions here. Feel free to follow them. There's also Docker instructions if you were installing it from the command line. We'll be using Portainer, so not really any need for that. And you do have some environmental variables for Docker. So let's see, let's scroll all the way to the top, and you see this Docker compose file right here. This is what we're going to need. So if we click on that, we can kind of take a look at the file, very, very basic. But what we want to do is we want to copy this file, copy the raw data, and head over to our Portainer installation. And let's click on containers. Actually, scratch that. Let's click on stack. And let's click on add new stack. And let's paste what we need, what we copied from the GitHub into our window here. And let's give it a name. I'm going to call it something really obvious, portchecker. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a look at this file. I want to break down the file a little bit and make some changes that we're going to need. All right, so first thing, we are going to change the container name because I don't like it to be just web. I want to be able to tell what that is at a glance. So instead of web, we're going to call it portchecker-web. Not too difficult, right? And same thing, if we look down a little bit farther, the container name for the API, I want to do the same thing for that. All right, so now that we've done that, let's take a look at the environmental variables that it's specifying in this file. Default port is 443, that's fine. Google Analytics, I don't have an API, I'm not tracking any sort of traffic for this site. And lastly, ports, I'm going to be routing all my traffic through Nginx Proxy Manager, so I don't need to expose any ports to the internet from here. I'm going to comment it out with a couple of hashtags or number signs or pound or whatever you want to call it. And as I look down farther, I'm also going to do the same thing for this API. If I do need to expose 8000, then I can do that also through Nginx Proxy Manager, but I don't believe that I'm going to need to be able to do that. If you are running this locally, something to consider. If you're not going to be using Nginx Proxy Manager, then just leave these the way that they are. Uncomment them out, let them expose those ports, and when you go to access this port checker, you'll be just using the URL at the top of your browser with these ports. So something to keep in mind. I occasionally get questions about how do I run this on just my local environment and not expose it to the internet. That's how. Very easy. All right, next up, that's it. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and let's run this because we have everything that I think we need. The image is going to pull the latest, and I think we're good to go. Yeah, I just wanted to change those names. All right, let's scroll down and let's click on deploy stack. Cool, very fast. And if we go under the stack here, we can see that everything is running fine. Yay, running. And we can look at the web and click on the logs, and everything looks fine. Yeah, it's good. Cool. All right, now that we have that done, let's take a look and see what kind of network it made for us. If we click on one of these guys and scroll to the bottom, it looks like the network we made was just portchecker _ default. That's totally cool. All right, let's go to our containers, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that Nginx Proxy Manager is also on that same network so that it can reach these machines. All right, so I'm going to go under my Nginx Proxy Manager. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to drop this down and select my network. Cool. And now I'm just going to click on join network, and I'm going to move myself up so you can see that. So this little button right here. Cool. And once we have done that, we see, if we scroll all the way to the bottom again, check it out. We are set up on this network. We have an IP address, and that's all we need. Cool. All right, I'm going to move myself down again. Here I am. And let's go to, let's head off to our DNS server and make sure that we have a subdomain set up for our port checker. So I'm going to be using my Senhow domain, and it's through Namecheap. If you're using a different provider, all we're doing is just creating an A record. All right, so let's click on create a record and select a record. All right, and for this, we are going to just call this port checker. And we're going to copy the IP address of our server. I'm just going to pull that from one of my other records, paste that here, and then just save all the changes down here at the bottom. Cool. All right, so we've set up our subdomain. It is portchecker.senhow.com, pointing to the external IP address of our host machine, or our Docker server. Cool. And let's go to Nginx Proxy Manager next. All right, as we've done before in previous videos, let's add a host, and let's fill in the blanks. So our domain that we've set up is easy, portchecker.senhow.com. Easy peasy. And this is asking us for our host name of the Docker web container, basically. All right, so let's find that. In case you don't know what that is, we go back to Portainer and we go to containers. It will be this guy right here. It'll just be this name. So if we copy this name, we go back to Nginx. And let's just paste that right here. Boom. Port. So if you weren't paying attention to what the port was, okay, it's easy to find. We can pull it in from our compose file. Or we can also go back to Portainer. Probably the easiest one is just to pull it from here. All right, so if we look in very closely, the port that it wanted to expose was 8080, and that was internet facing. It wanted to route it to port 80. So I think we're safe to leave it at port 80. The only thing I'm not sure about, it says default port 443. I'm not sure if that means that we're going to use that, or if that's just the default port that it checks for open ports on. I guess we'll find out. All right, let's hop back here. I'm going to say port 80. I'm going to block common exploits. I'm going to allow WebSocket support, and I'm going to save this. All right, now I want to add a little bit of security and peace of mind to my new website. I'm going to edit this one. And I'm going to go under SSL, drag this down and create a new one. I'm going to force SSL and agree to the terms of service and hit save. And if we got everything right, especially with our Namecheap, this should go away with no error message and give us our HTTPS through Let's Encrypt. It looks like it did. Cool. All right, let's test it out and see what we get. I'm going to click on this site. Awesome, we're there. I'm kind of curious to see what that 443 was. So let's do this. Let's do Google and not put a port in there. Well, I don't know what that environment variable is because it didn't put this in there as the default. I would have to specify it. Hey, look, it's open. Hey, well, that's pretty much about it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, man, leave them down below. But if you did find this helpful, maybe consider subscribing or giving me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you hated this video and you never want me to make anything like it ever again. Well, until next time, hope you guys take it easy, and I'll talk to you soon.